Hey, I wanted to talk to you for a second just about something interesting that came up in a conversation I was having this week with the church about existing debt versus funding for a new construction project. And this is a really important topic. If your church has any sort of debt and you're moving into an expansion project, it's really important to know exactly how the mechanics of funding work because the conversation this week, the pastor was believing that he could continue to pay off the existing debt through the end of construction and then fund the new building with the second loan on that. And so here's what that means. Here's what the reality of the situation is. There's not a bank in the country that's willing to take a second position on new debt in a second position to debt that you have existing. So say, for instance, you have $500,000 of debt on your church and you need to go out and you need to get a loan for $1.5 to $2.5 million. The first thing the bank's going to want you to see you do with that new funding is to pay off the existing debt. Otherwise, they're in a second position to a much smaller loan. And if you default on that first loan, then their loan's no good. So here's why that's really important. If you're building a $2.5 million building, or if you're building a $1.5 million building and your architect is out there drawing to that, and then you get to the point of where it's time to fund the project, and you have to take a $400,000 or $500,000 lump out of that cash to pay off an existing debt, that radically changes the plans for the building, which triggers a redesign. And in most cases, architects get additional fees for redesign. So back to one of the drums that I try to beat on a regular basis, it's incredibly important that you know what you can afford before you start designing. That means you know what your cash flow for your church is, you know what the gap is between what comes in and what goes out. You're beginning to have conversations with capital campaign consultants as well as funding experts so that you get a really good idea about what your total project budget is or the total amount of money that you can spend, and then you subtract things out like debt. And then you add things back in like your cash position, which hopefully we're up to date on the fact that you need to be building a cash position for specifically for building as far out as you can. So keep that in mind. If you've got existing debt, absolutely know where it's going to go before you start the process of design.